Hey guys, Spirit of the Law here. In this video, we're going to take a look at the new Fire Lancers, which are not to be confused with their mounted steppe relatives. This is a new unit given to the Koreans, Vietnamese, and Chinese, along with the upcoming Jurchens and Khitans, and we'll break down exactly how it works and what sort of roles it's well suited for. To start with an overview of the unit, it's created at the barracks starting in Castle Age and costs 40 wood and 50 gold. That makes it the only barracks unit to not cost food, and given food is the slowest resource to gather in Castle Age, that's situationally a point in the unit's favor. Notably, Chinese, Koreans, and Vietnamese are already archer civs as well, so it fits nicely with their extra wood and gold-focused economies heading out of Feudal Age. Checking out its stats, superficially it's a hybrid between a longsword and pikeman in terms of attack and armor, though notably has the highest HP out of this group, along with 0+4 range, which we'll look at in a moment. In other ways though, they also have attributes of the Eagle Warrior, with a modest anti-cavalry bonus, high gold cost, as well as any unit with bonus damage against eagles also affects this unit. Like the Eagle line, they're then fairly slow to train at 32 seconds each, compared to the 21 and 22 for the other units shown here, though that's partly offset by not needing an upgrade like Longsword or Pikeman. In terms of bonus damage, this is where a spear line comparison seems most apt, with Fire Lancers having +5 against cavalry, +4 against camels, +10 in total against elephants, as well as some against ships, and a small amount against buildings. For reference, a spearman has +15 and a pikeman has +22 against cavalry, so it again hints at being that longsword and spear middle ground unit. In the reverse, they take the bonus damage you'd expect from anti-infantry units like hand cannons, but also keep in mind they take anti-gunpowder bonus damage as well, meaning condottieri and winged hussars as an easy one to forget. On top of that, they also take anti-eagle warrior bonus damage, which has recently been reclassified as shock infantry. Examples of this range from +1 damage from the Spearline and Gabetto, up to +4 from Teutonic Knights, +6 from Longswords, and then +8 from Two-Handed Swordsmen and Champions. I wouldn't say they're hard countered by everything here, especially the Spearline, but you'll often notice they seem to underperform their stats against many other infantry. Of course, we have to talk about their very unusual one-off ranged attack. Prior to combat, each Fire Lancer shoots 3 projectiles that each deal 3 unblockable damage for 9 in total, regardless of enemy armor. Note that they'll never use this ability against siege or buildings, though they will use it against boats, in that case only dealing 1 damage instead of the usual 3. Often, this provides a nice bit of extra reach and pre-combat damage, though if they complete their 30-second recharge mid-fight, they will fire it again point blank. In some cases, that can actually lower the damage they're doing, such as against this battle elephant, where they go from 17 damage per attack to a single shot dealing just 9 damage, though to be clear, in most cases the charge attack is a net positive. The fact it takes 30 seconds to recharge means I doubt you'll see this used very much for hit and run against even very slow units, though on the flip side it has a decent reach of 4 tiles, which is not that far behind most archers in the mid-game. In terms of upgrades, it's of course the infantry ones you'd expect, plus arson and squires at the barracks, as well as gambazins for +1 pierce armor, and as we'll see is a big deal against skirmishers. Now I should point out, given there are 5 civilizations with Fire Lancers available, it's maybe not surprising there are no 2 civilizations which are exactly the same. To cover those variations briefly, the Jurchens attack 20% faster and have +2 line of sight. The Khitans get double the effect of infantry attack upgrades, have +2 attack against ranged units, and can reflect a quarter of incoming melee damage back at their attacker after a Castle Age unique tech. Chinese move 5% faster in Castle Age and 10% faster in Imperial. Vietnamese have 20% more HP, though are missing gambazins, so in some cases aren't necessarily the tankiest. And finally, the Koreans cost 20 wood instead of 40. Here are the stats in late Castle Age, though I'm going to be using a generic fully upgraded version for the testing we do momentarily, as the differences between civs really aren't that massive, and I think it's easier to just point out the odd case where one has an especially helpful bonus, rather than treat them like 5 different units. Speaking of which though, now let's see them in action, starting with some of the matchups where they perform the best. First off, against their direct competitors the Spearline, it's really not close. Here, with balanced total resources, they don't just win, but have in the ballpark of 2/3 of their HP left over. This is despite the pikemen having +1 bonus damage, and is a great example of how bonuses don't always tell the full story. Looking at the initial volley, notice 1 pikeman goes down with 3 others being significantly injured before the fight even starts. The end result mostly comes down to the Fire Lancer's superior melee stats, but the charge attack is helping to begin the snowball. Another class of unit they're generally strong against is cavalry. Light cavalry and camels are no trouble at all, and they can even beat knights with equal resources. It's a good but not great result, with, in this example, 22% of their HP left. It does raise an obvious question though, of why would you make Fire Lancers against cavalry over pikemen? Repeating the test by balancing around the pikemen's cheaper cost, with their much higher anti-cavalry bonus, they end up with roughly 2/3 of their HP left over compared to the Fire Lancers' 22%, so are clearly a more straightforward counter. Side by side, the Fire Lancer has just +5 attack compared to the pikemen's +22 against cavalry, albeit with a difference in attack rate, though pikemen are clearly much cheaper at 60 resources instead of 90. You could argue about the value of food here, but if all you're up against is cavalry, I think pikemen would have a distinct edge. But remember, they take a lot of bonus damage from crossbows and skirmishers, while the Fire Lancer does not, and I think that's the bigger point. To me, the situation for Fire Lancers is when you're up against cavalry paired with a ranged unit, where in this case, the Fire Lancer tanks 22 elite skirmisher javelins, or up to 33 with gambesons, while even with full Castle Age armor upgrades, the pikeman only takes 8. The fact is, both units are cost-effective against knights head-to-head, and the more crossbows, or especially skirmishers, are around, the more the Fire Lancer starts to justify its higher cost. In fact, as we just touched on, Fire Lancers are actually very skirmisher and even somewhat crossbow resistant. Here they take at least double or even triple the number of attacks of pikemen after gambesons. That said, they yet again seem to split the difference with longswords, who have 1 extra pierce armor and take 20 crossbow shots and 60 skirmisher javelins after gambesons for a lower overall cost. I should note that while you might assume Vietnamese would thrive in this kind of situation, given their 20% higher HP, the fact they're lacking gambesons makes them actually take 1 fewer shot from crossbows and 7 fewer from skirmishers and genitours. Just to sit on that crossbow comparison for a moment, I really don't want to give the impression here they're a full-on counter to archers. With balanced total resources, crossbows can hold out and win even with 0 micro, which is never a good sign. As you can imagine from that, once you start including micro, a mass of crossbows completely wreck Fire Lancers, even with that charge attack ability. In theory, they're a little better here than pikemen, but it's more that they live longer rather than perform as a counter. The one case to keep in mind is Khitan Fire Lancers have +2 attack against ranged units, so at least if they get close enough to the crossbows, they will hit surprisingly hard. So that's what Fire Lancers generally do well, with the list including spear units, cavalry, and skirmishers, plus being a bit more archer resistant than spear units. So then where do they struggle? The first major matchup to watch out for is against longswords, though any non-spear infantry is probably going to be trouble. The range attack does start off strong, but after that they just melt as the longsword's bonus damage starts to kick in. In fact, I see an important part of using Fire Lancers is coming up with something to pair them with to deal with longswords, such as scorpions or your own crossbows, as unlike eagles, you can't just run away from these. Again, siege is also arguably a weakness, as it is for most infantry, and remember their charge attack doesn't apply. In this case, that's maybe a good thing, as I'd personally rather they not stand 4 tiles in front of mangonels, rocket carts, and scorpions if possible. They're also only modestly anti-building, having just +1 bonus compared to even +3 from the longsword, though you can add an arson for a little extra punch. In Castle Age, they generally pair well with rocket carts and crossbows, and many of the civilizations having access to Fire Lancers are already incentivized to make one of those units. The trick is affording 2 gold units at once, and for that reason, it's not exactly a pikeman replacement, so much as just offering a slightly different profile. Next though, let's take a look at what changes you can expect in the Imperial Age. They of course have an elite upgrade, costing 650 food and 400 gold, giving them +20 HP, +2 attack, +1 melee and pierce armor, triples their bonus damage across the board, going from +5 to +15 versus cavalry. Their charge attack goes from 4 to 5 range, and their training time drops from 32 to 25 seconds. They just become better at everything they do across the board, which is reflected visually in their higher armor and scarier looking weapon. Imperial Age is also when a variety of unique and generic technology combos start to really emphasize civilization differences. Jurchens get Blast Furnace on top of their 20% faster attack, though lack the final armor, make them more of a glass cannon. Khitans then add in the last armor, Chinese go from 5% to 10% faster, along with adding in the final attack and armor upgrade, and Vietnamese and Koreans add in the last armor without the final attack upgrade, still benefiting from higher HP and a cheaper cost. Again, they're all fairly similar to each other, but no two are exactly alike, especially when you mix this all with access to gambesons from earlier. The overarching theme in Imperial Age for all of these civilizations, though, is that everything the unit was good at, it becomes even better. Where in Castle Age they beat balanced total resources of pikemen with about 2/3 of their strength left, in Imperial Age that becomes 3/4. Against arbalesters and skirmishers, they then take not just 3 to 8 times the number of shots of a halberdier, but then take even more shots than champions with gambesons, thanks to now matching that unit's pierce armor while having more HP. If they were skirmisher resistant in Castle Age, they become a straight up tank against them in Imperial. They also completely dominate Hussars with similar numbers, making them incredibly well-rounded against all 3 major trash units, assuming you have the gold to afford them in the first place. They also improve against heavy cavalry, and where it only won with 22% of its HP in a balanced fight against knights, they do significantly better against even paladins in Imperial, thanks to the tripling of their anti-cavalry bonus built into the elite upgrade. They still have less than half the 32 anti-cavalry bonus of halberdiers, but I actually think there's an argument elite fire lancers are better in this matchup. First off, they attack 50% faster, so the difference in bonus damage is much closer than it initially appears. Second, in this fight, the fire lancers lost 713 resources, with admittedly over half of that being gold. If we swap them out for the same number of halberdiers, reflecting the importance of pop efficiency, notably the halberdiers are cheaper, but actually lose more resources in the fight overall, in this case dropping a greater 780 worth of value. None of that is a gold cost, but shows with limited numbers to work with, the elite fire lancer isn't just pop efficient, but arguably even more cost efficient against cavalry in a team game from one point of view. At the same time, their weaknesses are largely the same, with the champion line still being a very strong counter, albeit maybe not quite as hard as it was in Castle Age. This is actually an interesting time to point out that Persians lacking two-handed swordsmen may become an issue, as they can't technically beat elite fire lancers with balanced resources. If fire lancers become a popular unit, any missing techs for the swordsman line are going to start to feel a little more impactful going forward. Of course, in Imperial Age, they also start to see new hard counters, like condottieri with their anti-gunpowder bonus damage, and also the hand cannoneer with its bonus against infantry. Without a meat shield or micro, the fire lancers here did a bit better than I was expecting, though in practice, I think hand cannons, along with most archers, will still be a decent counter to watch out for. Overall then, I think the role of the elite fire lancer actually shifts slightly in Imperial Age. It settles as one of the best anti-trash units in a team game setting, destroying all 3 trash units as well as anything I've seen, maybe even better than elite berserks. In team games, I think they also make a case for consideration ahead of halberdiers against cavalry, particularly if you care about pop efficiency. A support role pairing with archers or siege feels very natural, again with the caveat of being incredibly gold intensive, so they're inherently harder to pull off in 1v1s, where the spear line will often still make more sense. It's certainly a lot of factors to consider, and hopefully this helps guide your thinking around the unit and recognize opportunities to work it in. That'll do it for this one though. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you next time.